studios of WEAA-FM, Morgan State University, this is Jazz 101. Tonight we have a special guest, smooth jazz saxophonist Art Sherrod Jr. Art Sherrod Jr. is celebrating the new release of Back to Business. Art Sherrod Jr. enlisted Chris Big Dog Davis and wrote some new tracks like Tighten Up and Change the Key. The album also has some gospel classics like the Commodore Jesus is Love and some amazing R&B classics like El DeBarge, I Like It, Jackson's This Place Hotel, and Rolls-Royce Wishing on a Star. We'll be hearing some of those songs from Back to Business and talk to Art Sherrod about the recording of the Walter Hawkins classic Goin Up Yonder. I met you once before, and I was impressed by how fast you are on your feet, your quick wit. How does that help you when you're relating on stage? Or
Well, when you refer to the quick wit, I mean, you're always thinking ahead, which is important when you're playing music. You're not thinking at that moment, you're thinking ahead. So you're kind of thinking where you want to go, not just where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes music will change. Someone will alter a chord or play something a little different on stage, and then you have to go with it. So it's just your response time has to be really fast. So, that's how you apply it on stage.
do you feel that that's, I mean, this is your personality, but is that something that you may have had to develop as you're a musician?
Well, that and just, people pick on you, that's the other thing, when it comes to that, you just have to be fast when you're always the recipient of the jokes.
Okay, all right. Well, that's
you have to be fast on your feet.
Yeah, I had talked to your manager, but I basically said you would be a superstar 15 years ago. And what I mean by that is that smooth jazz has changed. I don't want to be a downer, but how does that work when you see that happen when you are an artist and you see that things keep on changing?
Well, you just have to, it goes back to the quick wit, you really just have to adapt. I mean, you either stay in the game and adapt or you get out. There's really very few options. You watch, as an artist, we watch the industry change. For the artists that, were in the game prior to 2000, year 2000, they're still in the game, and they have a certain level of success that people that have come along afterwards, they have to work a whole lot harder for. As you said, smooth jazz radio was huge in the 90s, the 80s, 90s. It was incredible. And early 2000s is when it started to kind of fizzle a little bit. And from there, it just kind of declined. So as an artist, we have to adapt all the time. We always have to be, this is the music business. And so there's a section that's all about music, and there's even more of it that's all about business. So when you say that, a lot of people think that if you're just a killer player, that's all you need, and that's not it. It's so much more business involved than just music.
Do you feel that now when you put out music, it's more strategic?
If we look at it from the business standpoint, one, you have social media. Social media didn't exist, and it probably wasn't needed as much because the artists that were heavy during that time, they were getting major airplay.
Sure.
You were hearing them everywhere. Every major city had a smooth jazz, something.
You'd have 3 hits per album, period.
Yeah. And so now it's just a totally different ball game, So I'm having to utilize social media. I'm having to be very strategic in the songs, and we use radio marketers. And when you're starting to get closer to the summer months, the radio marketers, they want something upbeat, and they want something that's very summery with nice grooves. So everything is very strategic. And you also have to be cognizant of where the contemporary jazz is now and maybe where it's going to.
Okay.
And
like, are you saying with an international flair, or
right,
they're going back to like Brazilian music again, or
well, I don't think that's where contemporary jazz is. The contemporary jazz is really an extension of R&B and blues and pop. That's kind of that area where contemporary jazz kind of lives, and then it's starting to incorporate a little bit more aggressive playing, but that's where it is. And you have to think when you talk about contemporary jazz or smooth jazz, as many like to put it, they think melodically. That's what you want: strong melodies, strong melodies, good grooves. That's kind of the making of what's considered to be a hit in contemporary jazz. Whereas before, jazz was harmonic, it was very rhythmic, and for the average listener, it was heavy.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to figure out, man, what is that? Just sounds like a bunch of notes.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't as melodic. Whereas
on purpose.
Yeah.
To be creative.
Yeah. The music, the contemporary side is a I don't want to really say watered down, but it's not as technical as it was previously. It's gone from being extremely technical, which is hard on the ear because, once again, being strategic, you have to think about your audience. And so when you create a record, you create the record for your audience. If your intention is to sell records.
Yes.
If you're making a statement, then you can kind of do whatever you want to do.
Expect not to sell records.
Yeah, well, you don't expect to sell as many. And so a lot of the artists talk about records for musicians and records for our audience, the listeners, the people who buy tickets. So when I hear a record that is packed full of, a lot of harmonic stuff, and it's really aggressive, and maybe not really strong melodies, you consider that to be maybe for the musician. And sometimes musicians, we kind of get into our own thing, and we feel as though we have to. Hey, I need you to know that I can play.
Yeah.
And so you try. I used to tour with Michael Henderson, and he was a great bass player, Miles Davis. And he would always tell us, he said, hey, man, less is best. And if you apply that, to the way your creation of music sometimes, not trying to put everything in, it's almost like a stew or something. And if you put all these different spices in there and you put too much in there, as soon as someone takes a bite, they're going to whoa, it's just very complicated to my palate. So, yeah, to answer your question, you have to be extremely strategic because this is a business. It's not just a love. It is a love, but it's a business. So you have to be strategic. You have to know when to release records. You have to know what type of records the industry is kind of vibing on at that point in time. It's a lot of things. You think strategically about what artists do you want to, if you want to have a guest on your record, who do you want as a guest on your record? Or do you have them on your record to help you sell records, to have them kind of as a marquee? Or do you just have them because, they just sound great? Nobody knows who they are, but I want them on my record. So all of those things are what goes in the minds of artists when they're creating records. How much is too much? How much is not enough? It's tough, and when you think of people like, a lot of a guy who gets a lot of criticism, but I have a lot of respect for him, is Kenny G. Kenny G, came up and he was playing that fusion. He's playing with Jeff Lorber, and he was an incredible player. And he's still an incredible player, but he and Clive Davis got together and made it a real business. They decided we're going to make songs with some great melodies, great grooves, and we're going to sell a lot of records because people can sing to them.
Yeah.
I always think about when I'm doing a record, is the melody that I'm creating something that I can sing? Because if I can't sing the melody, then I don't consider it to be a strong melody. you hear the melody and you don't hum the melody or you can't hum it, I need to go back to the drawing board and come up with something else. Because that's what, if you listen to any of these records that are at the top of the Billboard, contemporary jazz guys, they have great melodies. It's not about what they're playing.
If you've just joined us, you're listening to Jazz 101. Our guest tonight is smooth jazz saxophonist Art Sherrod Jr. But the current pop charts right now, it's really hard to pick apart a song and rip it into a smooth jazz standard.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really hard to...
Music's not what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's one of my biggest criticisms with current music when you think about R&B and pop. It's just not the same. When you compare that to Marvin Gaye, you compare that to Teddy Pendergrass, to all these incredible artists, Gladys Knight, Diana Ross, the Jacksons, Prince. They have, it was real music, and they put real good melodies to them, vocal melodies, and they became hits. Music is tough. To pick apart some of these artists, I'm not going to name any, but just to pick apart any of them, it's really, like you said, it's really tough.
Yeah.
Because you want a catchy melody.
We were going to meet earlier, and we were really going to focus on Goin Up Yonder, which is from your last album.
Yeah.
And white people don't know that song. Okay,
Right.
They don't know it.
Well,
but,
most don't.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just saying it out loud. But it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal song, and we were going to listen to the original one, and then we're going to go into your version. And what you did is something else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's what people do is like they know that song right away. Like they know, like, note for note what's going on, and they're with you. So I wanted to just focus on that song because that's what my reaction to that song was initially. Is that wow? What did you do to this song?
Right.
And what a find! How did that go out in the world?
For people that know Goin Up Yonder is a gospel song that you typically hear at funerals, and they sing it when the body is there in front of you because they're talking about going up to see my Lord. And so the concept of the record. So whenever you're creating a record, you really should have a concept. And so the concept of the record was I wanted it to sound live, and I wanted it to sound like my contemporary jazz records.
Okay.
And so, but I wanted it to be all gospel. So what we did was I got with a good friend of mine who produced the record, and we said, look, this is what we want to happen. So this song here, we want to make it funky. We want to find a way to
change the narrative.
Yeah. We don't want it to sound sad. We want it to sound fun and upbeat. And so when you hear the original version of Goin Up Yonder, it's sad. We figured, man, look, what if we add a horn section to it and add a groove to it? Wow, that would be different. And then on the back end, change it up and just make it go into this real funky thing. And that's what we did. It was, and it worked. And it kept the integrity of the song. So, sometimes when you remake a song, you can take it so far out that you lose the integrity of the song and the meaning of the song. So, in this sense, we took Goin Up Yonder. We said, look, and one of the things I do personally when I do a record is I don't like telling people, I want you to do it just like this. Because I like to get a little bit of flavor from everybody. I don't because sometimes someone has a much better idea than you do, and I don't like restricting them to it. I want to hear what you do first, and then we may have to trim it up.
I'm very impressed. I know that we're doing this interview and we're being spontaneous, but while we're doing this and we're talking about it, we may be playing this song so in the background, so we would be able to, so you guys could hear what we're talking about. You know, we're in this winter month. Now, it was so cold that I was freezing, and I wonder what you do like for your body to be ready for a show.
You know, it really varies. But, you know, one of the things, just body-wise, sometimes I go into like a stretch, almost like I'm getting ready to go on the basketball court. You know, you kind of get your muscles together. And, you know, when it comes down to your horn, you know, I like to blow air through it to get it warm. And then you just move your fingers. You know, it's one of my rituals that I like to do is I like to get away from everybody else for a moment and just play, and whether it's an exercise or something from a tune or whatever it is, and I like to separate them so I can get my mind in a totally different place. Because when you're playing music, especially when you're having to improvise, it's a little different when you're just reading everything off a piece of paper. When you're having to improvise, you're having to think. You're having to think about stories, multiple stories, and improvisation is based upon obviously technique, but also emotion and connectivity with the people that you're playing around.
Well, let me use an example. So now you play with loose ends often. Okay.
Right.
I mean, their songs are structured and they're phenomenal songs.
Right.
The songs already had that built-in sax already. It was already there for you. So then you could add the color to it. But do you every night just like turn on something different and then they go, oh my God, this is awesome, continue? Or are you kind of like cut into their, like, we want you to do a minute?
Well, it and that varies too sometimes. It could be, sometimes it depends on how much time we have. They might say, hey, let's just do 16 bars or do 8 bars. And then sometimes, I cue them. I mean, okay, we're going out, from the solo back into the tune. Okay. So, that's the cool thing about music and real music is that you can pivot like that. Now we don't play, when I'm playing with loose ends, we don't maybe go in some of the directions we might go from a jazz standpoint because their music is legendary, it's classic. So that's one of those things, you don't want to take it too far outside the lines because you lose the integrity of the music. But when we're on, if I'm doing a jazz gig, we may take this thing in a whole different place. Yeah. And which is cool. I don't, and even with loose ends, I have a lot of freedoms, and all the musicians have.
Their songs are built that way, where there's a lot of air, there's a lot of space.
There's a lot of freedoms there to add color.
I mean, okay, so you have you feed off audiences. So one night you're adding a little color, and you can just see the audience brighten, you just say, wow, that really worked. Do you feel that you want to? Is every audience different, or do you feel that you would turn around and say, I think we're onto something here, I think we want to stick with this or close to it?
Yeah, so certain audiences will take you a certain place. You have those listening audiences, and then you have those audiences that respond.
We're talking about loose ends. People are responding. They're they're way into it. Yeah.
But still, even with loose ends, sometimes you have people that are listening. Okay. And for an artist, when we're on stage, we see, most of the time we can see a couple of rows in. With the lights and everything, we really can't see too far out. We're always trying to judge, okay, is this really hitting them like we want? Are they receiving it like we want to? Sometimes we have to turn it up a little bit.
So you are from Texas, but you're in Maryland. Do you feel sometimes that you got to pull your family aside and say, I think I got to go up to New York?
Well, I get a chance to play around all over the country, which is good. I enjoy there's a different feel for East Coast and West Coast. The music is different. And for me, I can kind of tell when I'm listening to a West Coast artist and maybe an East Coast artist. My band is out of this area, but I also have units that I use in different parts of the country. When I'm in Texas, if I'm in Dallas, I have a band. Okay. And I have in Houston, I use a different band. Because the smooth jazz, contemporary jazz budgets aren't what they used to be. So I don't get a chance to travel with all my musicians, and so it's important for me to have charts for the musicians. The sheet music for them, and it's just a different thing. So each city can be different. Your music's going to sound a little bit different, because you're using different musicians. So I love playing in the D.C., Virginia area when I get a chance to. I love it. But I also love playing in L.A. and in those places too. I think the music is received a little different because on the East Coast, I think it has a little bit more of a groove-oriented type.
A crazy musical story, just something that is interesting that happened to you.
One story, and it kind of goes into something I heard one of the wiser musicians say, that you, regardless of the size of the venue, and regardless of how many people are in the audience, you have to play. You have to give it your all. And I remember doing an event for a young lady up in the Baltimore area. This was years ago. This was when I was first starting out as a solo artist. And I did this event. It was a charity event for the school, raise money. And it was a decent crowd. And finished up the gig, and I'm packing up, and all of a sudden, this big tall guy comes up, says, "Hey." And I look up, and I didn't know who this guy was, but he said, I'm going to give you a call. I enjoyed that, and I'd love for you to play in my band. And then he introduced himself. He said, "I'm Michael Henderson."
Okay, that's a good story.
And so at that moment, now you got to understand, I'm a child of the 70s.
Yeah.
I was born in the 70s. So, and I said, "Oh, okay, well, nice to meet you." And one of the things you learn as a musician is that a lot of people will promise you, "Hey, I'm going to give you a call." And you're like, "Okay, all right, well, cool." And, sure enough, he calls. And in between his call and his introduction, I go online and I'm researching him. I'm like, "Oh,
he's real."
Oh, yeah, this guy's real.
Yeah.
And the lady that did the event, her name was Tanya Williams. And she said, "No, that's Michael Henderson. If he said he's going to call you, he's going to call you."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you never know who's in your audience. So you can't sham on an audience, whether it's large or small.
Yeah.
Whether you play a small role or a big role, you just have to play your part and give it all you got.
Mm-hmm. Art Sherrod Jr., thank you for visiting Jazz 101. I'm your host, Tom Gowker. The producer of Jazz 101 is Tyron Rice. The show is recorded at the studios of WEAA 88.9 FM, your voice of the community and your source of cool jazz and more.